So something you may have not known about Fallout 76 is just how many factions there are in this game and how many of those are joinable with quests. I think most people are aware of the Brotherhood of Steel and the Enclave, but more or less in this video, what I want to do is give you an overview of all the major factions in the game, but more importantly, actually show you how you can join them and where to start their quests. I'm not really going to give you any spoilers, just minor things about the faction and the role they're playing in Fallout 76's world, and really the main focus is maybe to introduce you into a faction you didn't realize was as developed as you might have originally thought, and beyond that, just give you guys some stuff to do in game, do some of the cooler quests. So first and foremost, the faction you probably know about and the one I'll talk about the least are the Responders. So these are the guys that you're going to find in Flatwoods right after you start the initial game. They have this little logo and you'll find their presence all throughout the map, but particularly in the starting region of the forest. So more or less, this faction consists of firefighters, police, and medical staff that were around before the Great War, and after the Great War they formed into the Responders faction and just began to start helping people. You're going to start their quest by going into Flatwoods. That'll take you into Morgantown, where you could find out what actually occurred here, what led to them inevitably being wiped out. And honestly, I have to say, out of the 8 factions on this list, I found this one to be the least interesting. So really being a part of the Responders, but I'll talk about them kind of separate, are the Fire Breathers. Think of these guys as like the special forces or the larger elite unit within the Responders faction. You're going to be able to join them by going to the Charleston Fire Department, which is in the Ash Heap. This is one of the joinable factions in the game, but that honestly doesn't mean much because you could join every faction at the same time. Either way, these guys are a lot cooler than the regular Responders. Of course, you see a lot of fire memorabilia. They're mostly made up of firefighters, and their main role was fighting against the Scorched, a job that they sadly lost, but their quest is going to take you on a lot of conflicts and actually clearing out the Scorched from certain locations. And by joining this one and doing some of their quests, you could get that really cool fireman's outfit. Then we have what I would describe as the most interesting of the new factions, and the one most people don't know about. That's going to be the Order of the Mysteries. So to actually get access to this initial quest, you're going to have to find a note, which is in a fairly random location, so you probably missed it. Apparently there are several of these scattered around the map, but one of the particularly easy ones to find is at AVR Medical. You'll find a damage holotape on this woman on the outside. I already started the quest, so I can't actually show it to you, but it's gonna be right here. So the role of this faction was actually from the Silver Shroud, that comic book that was in Fallout 4. You could actually do a few quests and become the Silver Shroud yourself. One of the characters in that comic book was the Mistress of Mystery. She played a pretty similar superhero role as the Silver Shroud. I don't want to give away too much because there's a number of cool reveals in this questline, but this faction is heavily tied to that, both in theory and in reality. But even beyond that, there's a number of cool things you can get as a result of this, including outfits and armors. Plus again, the quests here are being regarded as some of the best. So we do have the Raider faction. The Raiders in this game obviously take on a very different role. If you walk anywhere near the top of the world, you get the prompt to listen to the radio and you'll start the Raider questline. You're going to be doing a bunch of various things for Rose, and you actually get a lot of really good rewards, that in the form of unique weapons and armor, and some of the other just more traditional rewards. The Raiders in this game are actually a bit different. More or less, there's a bunch of more wealthy families located in the ski lodges around the top of the world, and after the bombs dropped, they basically created their own little Raider factions, and there's multiple distinct factions. Rose was apparently like the boss of most of them, but it's interesting to see the Raiders as coming from prominence and not from poverty. Then what has been my favorite faction thus far, that with the Enclave. So I've actually completed the Enclave questline, and it definitely is a lot of fun. It will eventually lead to you launching a nuke, and more or less to actually start the Enclave quest, you're going to have to go to the abandoned mine. It's all the way out in the mire. There's a few higher level deathclaws to start this, and you definitely have to have either some good equipment, a group of people, or just be a high level yourself. The quest for this faction can definitely become difficult, but after doing this first quest, you actually get access to the White Springs Bunker, which is a really cool location. It's one of the most preserved locations in the world, and I would say even just doing the first quest for some of the rewards you get and access to this bunker is worth it alone. But by starting the Enclave quest, you're actually going to learn about the Free States and who started them also. To do the Free States quests themselves, you're actually going to have to go to Abby's bunker. This one's going to be out in the mire also, and this is another really cool and interactive questline. The Free States were more or less people who were viewed as paranoid and obsessed with conspiracy about the government. They took to creating bunkers out in some of these more swampy areas, and that's largely where you find them today, or what's left of them rather. But of course they ended up being right. The government and in turn the Enclave were actually doing all the horrible things they were speculating about, and bombs did end up dropping, so they were saved by their bunkers. bunkers. Following the Great War, they actually were researching and trying to figure out a way to stop the Scorch and the expansion of them. While starting the Free States quest and actually going to Abby's bunker, this will actually lead you to the Raiders, which I just showed you, but also the Brotherhood of Steel. This is kind of the unofficial way, I guess, to start the Brotherhood of Steel questline. You also can just go directly to Camp Venture, which is where you find the Brotherhood. This is definitely an interesting location. There's a number of very long holotapes here that in-depth explain why the Brotherhood are in this region. Obviously, that controversy kind of died down, but I don't think many people probably know why they're here or some of the backstory and lore behind them. Their questline is pretty cool. It actually gives you access to quite a few rare power armors, like arguably one of the best power armors in the game. The Enclave and the Brotherhood give you access to some really good loot towards the end game, and here you're going to more or less find out about the Thunder, why they decided to join the Brotherhood, and what their mission was in Appalachia. These guys actually ended up working pretty closely with the Responders. And then last but not least, what is by far the most boring of these factions are the Cult of the Mothman. Many of you guys have probably seen these. You can more or less just find them in the bottom of the Mothman Museum. There's a bunch of backstory and lore you could get from a few notes. They're mentioned in a bunch of other terminals and notes, but really there's no quests here. There's no way to join this faction. You get to learn about them, but I personally couldn't find online or in my own playthrough any way to actually do quests for them. What I'm thinking though is this very likely could be an area of expansion in the future. I wouldn't be shocked if one of the DLCs maybe tackles this and adds in a bit more content here, because there's already quite a few different things like unique armors and weapons that you can get. And of course also Mothman eggs, which you can sell for a lot of freaking caps. So yeah, those are the factions in Fallout 76 and how to start their quest lines. Hopefully you guys found this video informative. I wanted to make this because I personally found that the factions in Fallout 76 have some of the most interesting and kind of the most thorough quests. They still are relatively short and minor, especially compared to some of the previous Fallout games, but I personally have been having the most fun doing all these, so much so I actually wanted to make a video on the Enclave quest, which I just kind of finished. Unfortunately though, my hard drive died, or the connector broke off. So all of my footage from the past 4 years on my channel is now gone unless I could get this hard drive repaired. I could probably bring it to a hard drive repair shop and actually get a lot of that footage and a lot of that data back, thankfully, but that'll likely take a bit of time and it's probably just going to be smarter to go through the Enclave again. But that actually brings me to a question I wanted to ask you guys. Something I've been thinking about doing is creating a new character in Fallout 76 and just really slowly going through all of the story, the lore, the content the game actually has to offer in the form of quests. Is that something you'd want to see on this channel? Just a series really kind of completing some of the quests, giving you some of the backstory, maybe trying to find some of the best side quests, things like that. With my character I'm using right now, I kind of went from place to place trying to get things done quickly because, well, it was like when I first got access to the game. Again, something I've just been thinking about, so I figured I'd run it by some of you and see what you thought about that. But either way, before we actually end things off, I do have today's psychology fun fact of the day, and that's going to be on how to learn or how to study, how to actually remember things over the long term. This is something I feel like I've touched on in a few fun facts right when I started doing these like over a year ago, but I got a lot of new subscribers, a lot of new viewers, and it's like one of those things that I feel like is just the best thing I've learned in psychology. So I took a human memory class over a year ago now. It's probably one of my favorite classes I've ever taken because it's almost always relevant. We all have memories, we all hopefully use our memory. So you're a student and you want to abuse your memory to hopefully recall the most information possible before you do have a big test. How can you do that? One of the first things I would keep in mind is the testing effect. This is the phenomenon that it's actually really good to learn by testing yourself. Some people go insane with this and actually create mini tests based off of their notes with A, B, C, D answers. I'm not that crazy. A much easier way is to actually use flashcards. And this is something where if you plot out my grades, you'll see when I started using flashcards because my grades have jumped significantly. In studies comparing flashcards to just normal reviewing the material, like let's say you do have a printout of all the definitions and just reading those over, there's actually a really interesting finding here. As you can probably guess, the flashcards lead you to recalling things better, but reading things over actually leads to higher confidence. And I think this is one of those things that really could throw people off with the testing effect. So if you actually have the data, people who use flashcards got higher grades, but leading up until the test, people with flashcards didn't feel like they would perform as well as those who just read things over. Obviously that feeling was totally wrong and inaccurate, but outside of that, another one that's actually pretty good to do is desirable difficulties. This is the idea that when material is a little bit harder for you to process, it actually is recalled and remembered word better by you. So that could be as simple as actually just writing down the word and not the full definition. This is kind of a combination of the testing effect also, but basically let's say my definition is social psychology and I have to remember what that means. Instead of actually writing social psychology and then what the meaning is, I'll just write the word and try and remember it. You'll probably be surprised at how much better that makes you recall things. There's a lot more I could probably talk about on this topic, but I would say those two things in particular have actually made a pretty big difference in my academic life, and I would say flashcards especially are something you should take advantage of. I went from almost exclusively taking notes and reviewing those notes to now almost exclusively making flashcards. There's some things that are just way too big or bulky to put on a flashcard, but my grades have jumped as a result, and hopefully after watching this video, your grades will too. As always again though, I thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.